Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Uh, the United States is facing a housing crisis, and affordable housing advocates I've heard from are concerned that the new capital requirements proposed by your agencies may make the problem worse. An analysis from the Urban Institute indicates that banks affected by your proposal account for more than half of all mortgage originations. The Urban Institute's analysis further indicates that the proposal will disproportionately increase costs for Black, Hispanic, and low and moderate income borrowers. So one effect of this proposed rule seems to be in direct conflict with the goal I and many members of this committee share to close the racial home ownership gap and make housing more affordable for first-time home buyers, particularly buyers of color. Vice Chair Barr, Chairman Grunberg, Controller Sue, as you work to finalize this rule, what do you say to Black and Hispanic communities who are concerned that your proposal could make the dream of home ownership even more difficult to achieve?
Senator, first let me say we take these concerns very seriously. We're quite open to comment, and we want to improve the rule before we get to a final rule. This is one area where we've heard there may be concerns that the mortgage rules are overcalibrated. Of course, the proposal leaves the same rules governing mortgages that are issued by FHA or that are insured by Fannie and Freddie, that are guaranteed by Fannie and Freddie, agricultural loan, VA loan. So those rules don't change. Those are most mortgages in the country. But we do care very much about access to credit for low and moderate income borrowers. We hear those concerns, and we will very much take those into account as we work to finalize the rule.
If I may say, Senator, we're deeply sensitive to this issue. The preamble to the rule actually asks a couple of questions and outlines alternative approaches for risk weights in regard to mortgages, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to address this issue in the final rule in a satisfactory way.
I agree with what Vice Chair Barr and Chairman Grunberg said.
Well, I appreciate your desire to maintain safety and soundness in the financial system, but I would encourage you to also ensure that we keep enough capital flowing so hardworking borrowers can become homeowners. And while it's true that some of those other entities, FHA and others, may not be affected by this, not everybody is necessarily going to fall in that category to qualify, so it's really important. I want to thank you all on the work on the updated CRA rule. I think the changes make a strong step towards more accurately evaluating and encouraging banks' engagement with low and moderate income and minority communities that for far too long have faced barriers to financial inclusion. However, even the strongest of rules won't have an impact unless they are accompanied by appropriate supervision and enforcement. We saw earlier this year with the collapses of SVB and Signature Bank what can happen when regulators fail to properly supervise their charges and enforce our banking laws. So Vice Chair Barr, Chairman Grunberg, Controller Sue, as you work to implement the updated rule, what will you do to ensure your supervisory teams are fully trained and properly evaluating banks under the new guidelines?
Senator, you raise a very important point. Having an effective rule is only effective if you have effective implementation. We're going to be taking the next 2 years as the rule comes into place in 2 years from now to make sure that we have good, strong training for examiners, that we have good guidelines for examiners, that we make sure we're working very closely with banks and communities in partnership on implementation. So we have an implementation approach that works for banks, that works for communities, that provides the clarity that both banks and communities want. Mm-hmm. We're going to be developing online tools to help banks be able to comply with the rule at lower cost and to provide transparency to consumers and households that want to know how banks are performing under the rule.
Senator, I would underscore that the three banking agencies worked collaboratively to finalize this rule, and we do think the final rule is a strong one. And I think we're all committed to work together in a coordinated way on the effective implementation. As Vice Chair Barr said, the rule is only as meaningful as its implementation will be, and I think we're all entirely focused on that.
And I can say that staff are already working on implementation as we speak.
All right, I look forward to seeing the actual implementation in the way it's meant. Finally, Vice Chair Barr, you and I have spoken about the broken process for selecting Federal Reserve Bank presidents, which in 109 years has never resulted in a Hispanic or Latino bank president. And during the confirmation process, you made a commitment to develop a transparent process with meaningful public input on the selection of Federal Reserve leadership. I suggested 6 ideas to you. Since then, we've had a series of openings at Kansas City, Chicago. There's one ongoing in St. Louis. Can you give us an update on your efforts to reform the selection process? What changes have you made, and how have they impacted the recent and ongoing searches?
Thank you, Senator. First, let me say I share your view that diversity among Reserve Bank presidents and among the staff of the Federal Reserve and among the Federal Reserve Board and the FOMC is an important part of making sure that the Federal Reserve as an organization hears lots of perspectives and makes good decisions. There have been improvements in the process for selection of Reserve Bank presidents, improved transparency, improved outreach, but I think we have more that we need to do in that regard.
Thanks, Sir Menendez.